Hello everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of Atal Innovation Mission to this webinar with Mr. Prasanna Krishnamoorthy. I request you all to choose raise your hand option and type the question in the chat box. Once the question and answer session start, we shall call out for the questions then. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Krishnamoorthy very briefly, and then we'll hand over the presentation to him. Mr. Krishnamoorthy, who's the co-founder and has worked with over 200 startups and has over 15 years of industry experience. He has also worked with over 120 startups to make them large at the Microsoft Accelerator India. Sir, can I now request you to take over? Thank you.
Sure. Great. So I'm hoping that everybody can see my screen now. So just quickly, this is a quote which resonated a lot in the last few weeks, few months. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And for quite a bit of time in March and April, a lot of you would have felt similarly that for me, for example, I can't even remember what happened in February. It seems like all memories started from middle of March, right? So I'm sure that a lot of the startups, a lot of their customers, everybody is feeling that a lot of things that we knew from before aren't any longer true or have changed substantially, much more than they changed in the decades before this. So quickly, we'll just jump into what we want to do. I want to figure out a little bit more about who you are and then take it from there. So if those of you who are watching this, can you go to menti.com, menti.com, and type this code 44487 and fill up the question that comes up. Can you do that, please? So go to menti.com, use the code 44487 and fill up the do your vote. All right, so we have incubators and product startups. So this will help us, help me tune what I'm saying today appropriately. For those of you who came in late, you have to go to menti.com on your phone, perhaps. Type the code 44487 and then fill up who you are. Okay. Just give it 30 seconds more. Okay, so most of the folks here seem to be running incubators and accelerators. Some seem to be running product startups or services startups. Maybe they've come in via YouTube. So we'll go to the next slide. What kind of a customer do you serve? B2B India, B2B Global, B2C India, or B2C Global? We have B2B and B2C. Can all the startups that are doing this please fill this out? So with the color code, you can see whether they're services startups, product startups. Right. So quite a few B2B India, one B2B global, and one B2C India. Okay. All right. So we'll give it another 30 seconds. So we might have some interruptions from my kids. I'll chase them out if they come in. Okay, so good. So we don't have any B2C global folks here. Mostly B2C India, B2B India, B2B global. Great. So we'll move to the next slide. So what questions do you have on COVID and SaaS? Again, I'll come back to these questions, but essentially, if you have like specific questions that you would like me to address in this conversation, please fill those out here. So what I'm going to do is, leave this up on this slide, right? And we'll come back to this, and during the conversation or afterwards, I mean, during the presentation, you can fill this out. Okay. I'm going to move back to the presentation, I hope. All right. So I'll just quickly explain who we are and what we do, right? So I'm Prasanna. You can follow me on Twitter at Prasanna_SAYS. I've been CTO at the Microsoft Accelerator, which was at that time the largest in India. I've worked with about 200 B2B SaaS startups, ran product at Amazon, been an entrepreneur as well in the past. What is our goal? Our goal is to help 1,000 Indian SaaS startups get to financial success by helping them build value SaaS businesses. So then the question obviously is, what's a value SaaS business? So we believe that the world is moving to become a subscription economy. All kinds of software products are going to become products that are sold via subscription. That is something that customers will pay for on a monthly or an annual recurring basis. And we believe that value SaaS companies will be the leaders of the subscription economy. What does that mean? So if founders are able to get to product market fit capital efficiently, that is when they come into your incubators and accelerators, they're like a three-wheeler. They're kind of sort of there is something there. They build a capital efficient Tesla or a Ferrari, and then they can aim to become a rocket ship that goes further to the next, right? And so we are all about value SaaS and not vanity SaaS. What does that mean? So value SaaS means that there is value for the customers, there is value for the employees, there is value for the other stakeholders, including investors, and then there is value for the founders. So it's all about value and real metrics rather than vanity metrics. So that's about Upekkha. I'm just going to hop back to any other questions. Right. Okay, business continuity, inventory management, opportunities for processed food. All right, great. So we'll just pause here with the questions and then come back to those questions later, right? So what's changed in the last 3 months? So very quick update on what has changed so far. This is from a SaaS business called OpenTable. They help restaurants do bookings. And globally, if you look at the bottom one, it's from February till middle of March, and the top one is from middle of March to end of March. And basically, restaurants bookings just went down to zero, right? It's minus 100% from the previous year's bookings. Just just fell off a cliff. Right? From a Sensex perspective, all of you know this. Again, fell off a cliff. 30,000 from 40 plus thousand to 30,000 in a matter of days. Number of deaths. Incredibly, the world's most advanced country is leading in this as well, and still growing in the number of deaths. Lots of countries are following that trajectory, and unfortunately, while things are slowing down, not slowing down fast enough. Right? So what's happened, right? So if you think about it, a lot of things that we would never have imagined possible have changed. So the way we think about it, if for those of you who've seen the movie Matrix, there's a moment when things change, right, and the world changes. And right now, what's happened is whatever is the matrix powering the world, the rules that power the world, just got rewired. But many of us are driving still looking at the rearview mirror. What does that mean? So in January, if I had said or anybody had said, you're all going to be sitting at home for 40 days, going out only for vegetables and milk and groceries, nobody would have believed that, right? Nobody would have been able to predict that. But a lot of business decisions are still being made looking at the rearview mirror and not looking ahead, right? So if the rules of the world have changed so much, then how do we make sure that we are going to look forward and see how the world can become? And as entrepreneurs, how do we make sure that we are changing those rules and we are making sure that in this changed environment, we are building businesses that can add a tremendous amount of value for customers, right? So that's what we need to do. But a lot of decisions are being made still looking at the rearview mirror, thinking that the world is like the world of a January 2020. Instead, we are in a brave new world, right? So this is a completely invisible tsunami, right? It's just wiping out things. We have no idea what's going on. A lot of us are still in the fog with respect to what's happening to businesses. Today, I'm going to more specifically talk only about B2B SaaS and the impact both in India and globally, and how founders can build better businesses in these spaces, right? So the question is, how do you survive and thrive in SaaS? So first of all, don't panic. So SaaS, from what we've seen, and we work with about 40 plus B2B SaaS startups, is not as badly impacted as the rest of the industry. So folks in B2C have seen tremendous downward pressure in almost everything. But in B2B SaaS, in our startups that we work with, things fell off a cliff, but many have since kind of either stabilized or even started growing in some cases, right? So don't panic. If you're in a B2B SaaS context, then life is not that bad, right? Um, Understand that we are in a Star Trek voyage. So we are shooting for the traveling into the unknown. This is not the world of Jan 2020. Whatever you thought about, you knew about that world may no longer hold true. Right? So we are truly going into the unknown. We are going where no one has gone before. So regular rules don't apply. You need to figure out how to understand what the rules are, or you may even need to build the rules to go where you want to go. So the key thing to think about is that for most of you, from a customer urgency level, right? This is a hierarchy of needs that we build and we've spoken about a lot, right? So earlier, right, the key for most businesses was to start with regulation and compliance, then worry about revenue growth, profit and profit growth, then productivity and future growth, and then brand, right? But in this new world of April, May 2020, almost everybody's need has simply come all the way down into survival. So for those of you, who know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is basically a mirror of that. So in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all of us, almost all of us, in the human context, have come down to survival basics, right? Because we really can't think about self-actualization when we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. Similarly, for most businesses across the world, survival has become really the number one priority, right? So why am I showing this? So typically, when you are looking at selling things, right? In the past, a B2B SaaS company might go to someone and say, "Hey, we'll help your profit grow," or they might have gone to someone and said, "Hey, we'll help you with productivity," right? Or we'll help you with growth, right? In the future, or we'll help you build a brand. So today, you have to kind of look at your customers and see where they are with respect to this, and are they in a situation where they're still thinking about productivity, or are they thinking about revenue, or are they simply thinking about survival? And if the product that you're building and the value that you're delivering does not match with this hierarchy of needs, then it's not going to really make a dent and or make a change in how they buy this product, right? So in the past, you may have been selling a productivity tool, right? But today, you have to sell them something that helps with survival. So, for instance, earlier you might have been selling a workflow tool for them. Today, if you don't tune it and say, "Hey, this is a workflow tool which will help your customers work from home more efficiently," you're not going to be able to sell that product, right? So, all of us are in that situation. Does somebody want to say something? All right. Uh, so this essentially is what we are trying to do, right? And give me a second. So this is what we are telling all our startups that we work with, right? And this is something that you all can also help them with. For those of you who are founders, think about your customers and think about what is happening in their business, and think about where in this hierarchy of needs they are, and whether they've come from somewhere on the top to they've moved somewhere in the bottom, and think about how your product or your service or what you are offering to them can help them with whichever level it is, right? And if there is a mismatch in the level, then it's not going to uh, sell very well, right? So if your customer is thinking about survival and you're trying to sell them profit, it's not going to work, right? If your customer is thinking about just revenue, where is the next rupee of revenue coming from, and then you're telling them, "Hey, I can help you with productivity," that's not going to sell, right? So you have to be able to empathize with your customer and then sell them the right thing in an appropriate manner, right? Uh, so what do we think about as happening today, right? Before we do that, uh, I'm just going to quickly going into questions, just checking anything that's there that I can answer here. All right. We'll keep these questions for now, and then we'll come back, right? So I'll give you a bit of a framing of how we think about it. I'm not going to take too long. I'm going to take more questions from you folks, right? So we think about it in four different axes, right? And bear with me, I'll give you examples of each. This is not fully fleshed out thinking, so it will be a little raw, but given where everybody is and what everybody's thinking, I'm just sharing it as it is, right? So number one is geography. So one of the largest determinants of whether your customers. So if you are a business, you are serving customers, the geography of where your customers are matters incredibly to whether you will do well or not, right? So simple example, people selling into India, even in B2B, even in enterprise, have been struggling to even get the receivables out because payments are not getting processed. People are not able to go out. A lot of people are still on checks, not online transfers, and so on and so forth, right? If you have customers in Italy or Spain, I know several of our startups are actually trying to contact people in Italy, and there's no response. So we don't even know whether those folks who are, and in many cases, these are the owners of those businesses, are even alive. So that's the kind of a situation that's happening with respect to geography. UK, of course, has been badly hit. US, a lot of a lot of our startups as customers in US are doing okay, right? They've not shut down necessarily. They might still be running or running into reduced staffing. And so in general, for our startups that are selling into US have been the least affected among everybody. So think about geography as one axis. So if you are evaluating a business, if you as an incubator manager or an accelerator manager are evaluating a business, look at which geography the most of the customers are in, and if they are in the US or elsewhere, they are less likely to be affected or should be less likely to be affected, right? Uh, Second axis is SMB versus enterprise. So if you are in B2B SaaS and if you are selling into SMBs versus selling into enterprise, SMBs have been massively hit, right? In India, SMBs, for example, has been just completely brutal, right? Restaurants are shut down with 100% zero, basically zero dine-in. Some of them doing takeout, some of them doing delivery, but even that is not happening in India, right? But globally, all over the place, right? SMBs have been like fairly badly hit. Enterprises are doing, of course, way better because they have budgeting, planning, they have business continuity, all of those kind of things. So if you're selling into enterprises, you're going to be way better off than if you're selling into SMBs. There are exceptions, of course, right? So there are large enterprise restaurant chains, especially in the US, in the mid market, which have done much worse, simply because of very large exposure compared to other things, right? So which leads me to the third axis, which is the vertical and the industry. So obviously, some verticals have been hit much more than other verticals. So restaurant, hospitality have been travel completely brutal, right? Gone to zero, no revenue, nothing, huge capital costs, huge sunk costs, and literally zero revenue. In some cases, they had to give money back as well, right? So they are really suffering, right? But here's the interesting thing, right? There are always exceptions. So from this, what I've been telling you so far, you would think that SMB, small restaurants in the US would be extremely badly hit, right? And so therefore, you'd be right. But that's where the last bit comes in, which is the trend with COVID. Right? So while you would think that SMB small restaurants in the US would be very badly hit, and therefore anybody trying to sell software to small restaurants in the US would be very badly hit. Interestingly enough, one of the startups that I work with sells online ordering software for them, and they used to get, let's say, they used to get 10 sales a week, right? Now they're getting 10 sales a day. So it's just blown through the roof in terms of demand because all those restaurants are doing very badly from a dine-in perspective, but in the US, delivery and takeout are still open in most places. So and they need software to do this, so they're implementing that software, right? So is the trend with COVID positive or is the trend with COVID negative, right? So think about these four axes. The thing is, you need to find a box for your startup or a startup that you advise where they can move across one of these boxes and find a box where things are okay, right? At the end of the day, business is still going to happen. Business is still happening. Some people are doing better because of COVID than without COVID, and we'll talk about some examples of that. There are, geographies where things are better, right? And there are verticals where things are better. So for most of the startups that I've seen, a shift in one or two of these, not even all four axes, you just need to shift one or two axes. Will go from a really shitty place to be in because of COVID to a decent place to be in because of COVID, or even a good place to be in because of COVID, right? So that's how we are thinking about it. So, for example, with COVID in a B2B SaaS context, obviously, many of you would have seen that any kind of remote work tools, especially on the video conference side, e-learning side, have done tremendously well, right? Zoom off the charts, Microsoft Teams off the charts, Slack off the charts, grown like 3x, 5x, 10x. I think Zoom grew from about 10 million daily active users to about 70 million daily active users, similar with Teams and so on and so forth, right? So those are the obvious beneficiaries of the trend after COVID, right? But if I had asked you to come up with an example, it's very unlikely that you would have come up with online ordering software for restaurants, right? So that's where talking to customers and understanding what's happening is very, very critical for all of you to find out, hey, because of COVID, who's doing better and how can we help them? So, for example, one more company that I work with, they sell software to lock Android devices. And for them, basically around the world, suddenly like people have stopped buying devices, right? And so they were like uh, thinking that things are going to go really, really bad. But then interesting things happened. Like some people are buying tablets, repurposing them for giving them to old age homes because they don't want people walking into old age homes anymore. They're saying, hey, at least until this stuff clears out, let's have more tablets in old age homes, and those need to be locked and those need to be protected. Then they got a customer for who actually literally manufactures ventilators, and they fixed Android tablets with those ventilators to monitor those and transmit the results back, right? And then they've got another order for something around Wi-Fi, which was a use case that is actually because of COVID picking up. Right? Similarly, you would think that hiring is completely frozen in a lot of places. So a company that's doing assessments or hiring and stuff like that would be struggling. But interestingly now, because hiring is frozen, internal transfers are becoming a very big thing. And those internal transfers having become a big thing, somebody has to figure out, hey, when I'm doing an internal transfer, my project is going well. Which project is not going well? My project needs a certain kind of skill, and I need to hire from internally within the company someone else and take them and put them here. But how do I test them? How do I know whether they're good at the skill that I want, right? So even in hiring, somebody who's been able to make that shift has started seeing some initial traction, right? Um, Retail, right? So retail you'd think is like really bad because people are not able to go. People who are helping retailers move online are actually seeing quite a bit of demand, right? So critical thing for everybody is I'm just going to go back to the hierarchy of needs. Understand your existing customers. Where are they in the hierarchy of needs? Where is their urgency, right? And at which level is it? Is it survival, regulation, revenue, profit, whatever it is? Map how your product can help with that. Ask your customers, hey, how can my product help you with that? And then take that and try to tune your product for that, right? So I've gone on for about half an hour. So I know that there are some questions. So maybe I'll take some questions now before we, go on. So the next question on Menti, right, is which SaaS businesses do you think will benefit most from COVID? So you can fill in multiple things there. It's the same code. Go to menti.com and use the code 44487. And I'm just going to look at some questions that had been sent to me, and I'm going to start looking and answering those questions. All right. So some of the questions that I have, is there any possible way for rapid funding for SaaS and emerging technologies? Right. So there are some initiatives, including by a company called Indifi, and SaaS Boomi, which is helping SaaS companies get funding in this environment. So they are helping people with a annual recurring revenue above $250,000, right? So that is available. They'll provide that funding in 14 days. How should startup founders assess and manage systemic risks from the macro strategy? So I think for me right now, the macro strategy is very hard to nail down. I would rather look at a segment, a sub-segment, because and try to focus on within that sub-segment, what can we pick up where we can help. The reason I'm saying that is if you think restaurants are dead, then you would not be thinking of maybe my product can help restaurants move online, right? Or move their demand generation online. If you think, hey, retail is dead, then you would not be thinking of ways in which you can move retail demand online, right? And that's a startup that somebody is doing, which is, successful as well, right? So I think it's very hard at this point, and it's very simple, right? The macro stuff is always hard unless somebody told you and prove to you that in January they predicted that COVID will have this kind of an impact. Today, there is no point in saying, I can predict the future from a macro perspective. So today, I feel I am not qualified for sure to predict what is going to happen in the macro in any time frame beyond a week. Right? I have no idea. Right? What's going to happen next week? No clue. What's going to happen next month? No clue. Right? In the long term, what's going to happen? We have no idea, right? The first seroprevalence study in Spain came out, I think, today or yesterday, and basically it showed that only 5% of people in Spain, and they tested 600,000 people. Out of the 600,000 people, 60,000 people, 60,000 people that they tested, only 5% are likely to have had COVID-19 so far, right? So, and with that 5%, they've had almost a huge number of deaths, right? I think it's about 26,000 deaths, right? Now imagine that 100% of the population got COVID. You'd have 20 times more deaths, right? You'll have in Spain alone, you'll have anywhere between 250,000 to 500,000 deaths if everybody was infected. So what does that mean for the lockdown? Right? It's not going to be something that can be released as easily, right? So I think as founders, all of us should only plan for 7 days, 21 days, 30 days kind of a horizon. Trying to plan on what will do well beyond that, how will things go well beyond that or not beyond that, etc., is going to cause a lot of anguish, but not necessarily be productive, right? Um, Next is, how should B2B SaaS startups look at business continuity plan, right? I think quite a few people have posted business continuity plans. You can search for them. So business continuity, essentially from a SaaS perspective, if you're running a SaaS business, if your recurring revenue has not fallen off the cliff because you're serving different types of folks, you should be just looking at making sure that your runway extends as much as possible. You should be taking care of your expenses. You should be looking at cutting down those expenses and making sure that you're not paying out too much, right? At the same time, for your customers, make sure that you're hosted in a good place. Your costs are low. Ideally, as a B2B SaaS startup, if you are cash flow positive month on month, that'll be the best way for you to survive this and figure out what's happening and get into the thrive of a model, right? What is the future of Indian SaaS startups in the post-COVID global economy, right? I think the future is going to be really, really good for multiple reasons, right? So one is before this was happening, our thesis already was that field sales is something that's being slowly replaced over time, right? And if you wanted to sell something for $100,000 per year earlier, you would have to do field sales. You would have to meet the customer at least once, face to face, if not more times, build trust, build relationship, all of that stuff. Today, from field sales perspective, nobody wants to meet salespeople. especially somebody who's traveled and come from somewhere else. So nobody wants to meet you. So that kind of levels the playing field. So if you are a salesperson, whether you're sitting in New York and your customer is in New York, you still can't meet them. Nobody wants to meet you. Or you're a salesperson in Bombay, or you're a salesperson in Delhi, or you're a salesperson in Bangalore. The customer still doesn't want to meet you. So earlier, if you wanted to land $100,000 deal, you would want to go and meet the customer, and the salesperson in New York meeting a customer in New York had an advantage. But today, the salesperson in Bangalore and the salesperson in New York are on a level playing field with respect to meeting the customer. Now, of course, there's still a culture, there's still language, there's still time zone, all of those kind of things. But many of those things can be overcome bit by bit, right? And so I think that's a huge leveler for Indian SaaS startups selling globally, right? Because those guys, those folks can't anymore sell the way they used to. When will this shift again? No idea, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Because the second part of this is a lot of the companies that have gone work from home are now going to go full remote. Twitter recently announced that they are going to be 100% remote work from home from here on. Their employees can be anywhere in the US and they don't care. Right? So when that happens, imagine if I'm a field salesperson and I'm trying to sell you something for $100,000 or $200,000, I'm not going to be able to meet you because, like, you might be sitting in Alaska for all I know. Your company might be in San Francisco, but you might be sitting in Alaska. I can't come to Alaska to meet you. And even if I come to meet you, I won't be able to meet the rest of the team, other team members who are making those decisions, right? So that's also not going to happen. So it's going to become fairly um, online from a sales perspective, which is completely really good for India, right? Which are the emerging sectors that could adopt SaaS products post this pandemic? I think when people go work from home, when people need to automate, when people need to go remote, when people need to manage this, the good part is any process change in the real world today, in most enterprises, has to have a parallel change in the software as well. So that is going to cause a lot of software that needs to be written or needs to be created, or software that needs to be functional for any of these businesses to make a change in their offline world as well. Right? So, for example, supply chain automation. So today, a lot of the people who were very innovative in their supply chain are doing a lot of just-in-time kind of processes, and therefore were able to cut their inventory down a lot. Are the same people being hit as they try to restart their supply chain because they don't have inventory, their supplier doesn't have inventory, that person's supplier doesn't have inventory. So that inventory, light inventory model is causing a lot of pain as they restart. Right? Even hospitals, for that matter, hospitals have moved to a light inventory model where they were not maintaining a lot of PPE, a lot of masks, a lot of things like that because you trusted the supply chain, right? So now, if that trust in that supply chain is not there anymore, then that supply chain model has to change. If the supply chain model has to change, then the supply chain software has to change as well, right? So at that level, a lot of things are going to change. Education, right? Online education. So my kids are like 4 years old. It's crazy, right? It's like pre-kindergarten, and they have like 1 hour of some teacher talking to them on Zoom every day in the morning. Completely crazy. I have no clue what's going on. But at least it gets them to sit in one place for 1 hour at a time, right? So when they're sitting there, the teacher is like going through a set of things. They're struggling. They're like trying to figure out. They put a video. They ask people to do stuff. They have no idea what's going on. They're looking at it in Zoom. This whole experience is like, completely broken, right? At the same time, 3 months ago, if you had said that my kids are going to be taught by a teacher via Zoom for 1 hour every day, I would have said that's not going to happen for the next 5 years, right? But it is happening, and the tools for that are going to be built. Right? So for pretty much most of the areas that you're talking about, anything in the world where business has to happen, if business has to happen, then software has to be there for that business to happen. People who are writing those products, those software products for those businesses to happen, are the ones who are going to make those changes possible for those businesses to run. and that's what's going to happen. Another example, today we have farmers who are selling directly to our apartment complex. So they literally bring their trucks full of like one thing, right? So it might be, pomegranate, or it might be, tomatoes, or it might be avocados or mangoes or whatever it is, right? And literally, this is a farmer who's hired a truck, got some 10 tons of mangoes, and they're bringing their truck to Bangalore, going apartment complex by apartment complex, selling and taking payment on UPI, and they're like super happy, right? And one of the pineapple farmers was he got very fairly emotional, right? Because what he was saying is, look, we used to get only 1/5 of the price that we are getting now, and so much of our produce used to go to waste because this whole process used to take so much time, between the time we harvest it, take it to the mandi, somebody buys it, it goes to somebody else, some trader ends up in the hands of the customer. So much waste used to be there. Today, I'm just bringing my 6 tons, 7 tons of pineapples. You guys are buying it. I'm getting a price that is literally 4 times more, 5 times more than what I used to get, and it feels so happy for me to give it to the customer. Now imagine that today this is just happening in an ad hoc basis. Can this be scaled to lakhs of farmers and tens of lakhs of houses and apartments? Can't be scaled without software, right? And there are people writing that software which is going to transform that supply chain and that agri marketplace as well, right? So these are all things that are going to change, right? So it's about 4:45. Malika, should we take any more questions? Can we take those questions now?
Absolutely, sir. So, I'll just read out the questions one by one.
Sure.
The first one is there any possible way for rapid funding for SaaS and emerging technologies?
Right. So Malika, I think these are the questions that I already just answered. So maybe I'll go to the questions that we collected on Menti.
Absolutely, that would be a great idea.
Okay. So I'm only going to pick the questions that are more around SaaS, right? Entertainment. Okay. Your thoughts on most efficient distribution channels to sell SaaS without spending on marketing. So bad news for you, depending on your definition of marketing. Marketing is going to be a much, much more important way to sell SaaS than anything else, right? So for me, marketing is not about spending money. Marketing is about telling your message in the right way to the right person, such that they understand the value that the product can bring to them, uh, in a place where they are likely to hear your messaging, right? Does this need spending? No. Perhaps you are mixing up marketing and advertising, right? So do you need to spend on advertising to sell SaaS? No. Do you need to spend on marketing to sell SaaS? Yes. So what do you need to do? You need to have a clear message about what value your product can bring to customers. You need to be talking with your customers at a place where they are. This means that you may need to be a part of a webinar that they're listening to. You may need to be part of guest post on somebody else's site where they're already a customer for that company. You need to be speaking at events where they may be listening to you. So you need to be there where they can hear you, right? Then you need to be very clear and build relationships with your prospective customers. And again, has to be in a place where they are. So again, this is all going to cost time and money, right? But within that, what's the most efficient? It is going to continue to be content. It is going to continue to be one-on-one relationships that people can build. Both these are going to be the most efficient channels to spend to sell SaaS while spending the least amount of money on from a marketing perspective, right? What are the opportunities for the inventory management space? So inventory management, I don't know what inventory management specifically here, because every supply chain, everything is different. Obviously, offices are going to like massively white collar knowledge worker office spaces are massively going out of fashion. Nobody wants to sit in tight spaces with somebody else who might have COVID or something else. Work from home seems to be working for a lot of people. One of the ways that I heard this being said was it might be better to have 10 offices with in 10 different cities, each of one floor, rather than having one office in one city with 10 floors and the same number of people, right? So those kind of things are going to happen. So it's actually going to explode the number of places that are used as offices. It's going to explode the number of things that are going to be used in an office. Right? Now, how do you inventory this? How do you manage this from a business perspective? Is anybody's guess, right? But there are going to be problems in those areas, and somebody who's going to solve those problems is going to make money. Right? Next question. So, processed food industry. I have no idea. I am a foodie. I like to eat food, but no clue about that. Right? What kind of process or business model innovation should a startup look for to differentiate their product from existing SaaS players in the post-COVID economy? Again, I would go back to the hierarchy of needs. Just make the markets are all insanely large, right? All of these markets are really, really, really large. So don't worry about competition is what I would say as a first approximation, right? Don't worry about competition. Look at your customers, your existing customers or prospects. Look at how the problem that they are solving has changed. So, for example, if you take a restaurant, they're not going to be able to have more than 30% of the seats filled at any point in time. So, what does that mean? They have to make same amount of profit with 70% less seats occupied. So, what do? How do they increase their revenue in that situation? Is there software that you can build or services that you can build or that you can deliver to them, which will help them do that? If you can help them do that, then they're going to pay you money, right? The other side, from a business model perspective, the good part about building an Indian B2B SaaS startup, especially if you're selling globally, is that your costs are fairly low, right? And you can amortize, and the marketing costs and the R&D costs are much lower compared to the your business that might be in the US, right? So you can maybe offer things as a starting price much lower than others. But I don't like that very much, right? But instead, what can you do is you can offer more customer success. You can help customers become more productive using your tool by putting people, which they cannot do, right? It'll be very hard for them to do that because their people are much more expensive, right? All right. Let's see if there are any other questions here. All right. So, okay. So, I think how do we reassure customers, right? So it should be the opposite. Your customers should be reassuring you. You should be asking them, "Hey, are you okay?" Right? Because if you're okay, you can pay me, and if you pay me, I'm going to be okay, right? So you should be looking at what's happening to your customers. You should be looking at what value you are adding to them in this new scenario, and you should be looking at ensuring that if your customers are doing well in the situation, they pay you enough for you to do well, right? Or they pay you more so that you are doing okay. So your runway should be coming from customers, right? And that's what we've advised to all our startups, and we are making sure that all of our startups, all these startups that I work with, are cash flow positive on a month-on-month basis in April, right? Should be getting new revenue in April, new revenue in May, so that by the end of May they're actually cash flow positive in this new economy, in the new normal, right? Then I have no idea about schools. Uh, what's your thought on taking off on a time accounting software for remote team management? So these are the kind of ideas where you should go to prospects and say, hey, what is your problem around remote team management? And they will tell you a lot of problems. And your job is to say, okay, which one should I solve for you today? And they will give you a priority list. And then you ask them, which one are you going to pay me to solve today? And then that list will become very small, right? And if you're able to get paid for that problem today, in April, in May, in June, then that's going to be a fairly solid problem to go after, right? So that's the way that I would think about it. I would not think about, hey, is time management good or not bad or whatever, right? I would think about which prospects can I go talk to and what can I sell them? And I would prioritize the selling bit because my revenue is more important for me, or even the promise of revenue is more important for me than some hypothetically saying yes, time management is going to be more important when things go remote, right? Because while that may be true, it may still be hard to figure out the nuances of what kind of a time management, time accounting product should be built, right? I'm just going to look. I think there's some few more questions, right? So COVID-19 unexpected event brings an opportunity to support business better with SaaS products. Sure, I agree with that. And I think the what businesses will be good now after lockdown, we've already addressed. Right? We are almost out of time. So one question that I would want to ask to all of you as businesses and as entrepreneurs yourself is what's one thing you are changing because of COVID-19, right? So the last question on Menti. I think people are putting in their names. I don't know how to ask these questions. Or Malika, can you check if there are any questions on YouTube, on the YouTube live stream?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in the meantime, for the incubator accelerators folks here, we as Upekkha are open to partnering with you. So if you have SaaS startups, B2B SaaS startups that want to grow faster, if you have anything that you want to do with B2B SaaS startups, we work with a fairly large number of B2B SaaS startups. Many of them are doing better in April than they were doing in Jan. Their businesses are actually doing better because of COVID. We are actively helping many of our B2B SaaS startups founders to figure out how to make this transition, and hopefully, in May and June we should see results of that. So for those of you folks who have companies that are doing SaaS or are building SaaS products or have SaaS customers and are struggling to understand how to do things in the new normal, please reach out to me, and we would love to partner with you in many different ways. Some of our startups might want to be part of your incubator if they can get access to different things. Your incubator startups might want to work with us to do better on the SaaS side. Malika, any final questions?
Sir, I think you've answered all the questions. So that's a great thing. We've almost ended at the right time. And I'd like to thank you. Thank you for the very arcane comments and in a very different way, a very virtually engaging session in the past 55 minutes. So thank you so much for that, sir. And I'd also like to thank you for your time and the audience as well.
Sure. Thanks, folks. So our next cohort starts in August 2020. If you follow me on Twitter, follow Upekkha on Twitter, we'll let you know when it starts, and you can apply for it, and we can figure that out.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you, sir.
Bye.